Good evening, I'm Ces Orenia Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
There's no other bigger story tonight than the stalled impeachment trial and moves to rush it as time for the political process is running out. A few hours ago, the two-member minority bloc formally set in motion the ouster complaint versus Vice President Sara Duterte by asking the Senate to convene as an impeachment court. And as we speak, the upper chamber is yet to vote on that motion. Session has been suspended but will resume shortly, we hope.
And Senate President Escudero is not giving in to pressure from various organizations to start impeachment proceedings forthwith. He is also cold to the idea of finishing Duterte's trial in only 19 days, and House prosecutors agree.
On the sidelines, there are still moves to outrightly dismiss the impeachment trial even before it begins. The most recent resolution to do so came from no other than Duterte ally, Senator Robin Padilla.
Hindi porkit pabor sila sa impeachment, mamadali na namin at susundin namin sila.
Hindi ito parang si Carlos Yulo na sa kaka-gymnastics nila, mental gymnastics, mapapalisot nila yung kanilang poon.
So we're counting the days before the scheduled start of the impeachment proceedings on June 11. But some lawmakers have moved to kickstart the trial. And now there is a motion from Senator Raffy Tulfo to vote on the measure. Mobile journalist Mary Mon Reyes reports to us live from the Senate. Mary Mon, nagsisimula na ba ang botohan? Parang wala pa yata.
Good evening. So far, wala pa kasi kani-kanina lamang bago matapos itong o kaya mag-recess muna o masuspend muna itong kanilang plenary session nagsalita si Senate President Escudero at ipinaliwanag niya yung kanyang end of the conversation. Pero sa ngayon, kasi ilang minuto na lumipas, hindi pa natin nakikita yung pagbabalik ng session. Pero anytime soon, hopefully within tonight, hindi lang magkakaroon ng pagbabalik ng kanilang session, kundi magkakaroon na ng final voting kung kailan nga ba gagawin ng Senado yung kanilang pag-convene as impeachment court. Kasi base sa mga kaninang mga napag-usapan ng mga senador, it's either today, tonight, tomorrow, or it will remain as scheduled in comparison dun sa delayed schedule na talaga na June 11 gagawin yung pinaka-convening of the impeachment court. Ladies.
Mary Mon, may surprise move. Nagsalita si Senator Padilla sa floor pero hindi natin narinig na tinukoy niya yung kanyang resolution na filed today seeking to dismiss the impeachment complaint. Tama?
Tama yan. Dahil, pero ang sinabi niya kanina ni Senator Robin Padilla, etong kanyang ginawang resolution is sa kanya lang daw. Pero nung around the early afternoon kasi nung tinanong natin na okay na po ba, sino po ba ang kasama ninyo dito, nanlambing na po ba kayo na merong makikisama sa inyo sa resolution na ito. Ang sinabi niya huli he was waiting for Senadora Amy Marcos bago niya nga raw i-file ito. Pero kanina nga may nakuha tayong impormasyon na itong resolution niya, final na at ito ay purely nanggagaling lamang sa kanya.
Mary Mon, anong usap-usapan dyan, no? Ano ang pagbobotohan ng Senado as plenary tonight? Kasama ba doon yung bill ni Senator Padilla or yung move lang, no? Yung resolution lang ng minority bloc?
Ang pinakapagbobotohan nila kasi marami, halo-halo yung naging opinion. Ano nga ba ibig sabihin ng forthwith? Kailan ba dapat mag-convene? Pwede bang tumawid between the 19th to the 20th Congress itong pag-handle ng impeachment trial? So ang inopen kanina ni Senator Raffy Tulfo is pagbotohan na natin kailan ba gustong mag-convene ng Senado bilang impeachment court. At para sa mga mas malalim pang detalye, heto ang aking balita.
Civil groups gathered around the Senate on Monday to pressure the upper chamber to kickstart the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. And not a minute later, for rallyists, 4 months of waiting is already too much. But Senate President Escudero is adamant there is no rush, while senators stand to abide by their constitutional duty to hear the complaint. And the upper chamber is sticking to its calendar. They will only begin reading through the articles of impeachment and convene as a court on Wednesday, June 11.
Gusto nila madaliin namin yung aming constitutional duty. Gagampanan namin yun, pero hindi sa oras na gusto nila porkit nagmamadali sila. Wala namang nagsabing hindi namin gagampanan yun dahil sabi ko nga, proseso ito na dapat sundan at sinusundan. Hindi sa oras na gusto nila, hindi sa pinili nilang panahon.
By Monday afternoon, Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel filed the motion the Senate have no choice but to act on. Pimentel cited the push from various organizations to jumpstart the impeachment trial, triggered by pronouncements that there could be no more trial against the Vice President. Pimentel specifically requested to begin presentation and reading of the articles of impeachment on Tuesday, June 10th at 2 in the afternoon. Fellow minority senators headed by Senator Risa Hontiveros seconded the motion.
Ngayon, if I might add, biglang bibilisan. An impeachment trial of all of 3 days. We've dragged our feet for several months, and then suddenly we tell the Filipino public that we are able to sift through the evidence and exact accountability from the second highest official in our land within a period of 3 days. What insanity is this?
Meantime, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano stood up to Escudero's defense.
It's unfair to just blame the Senate President. 23 naman tayong senador Conscious naman tayo lahat nung February 5. Nandito naman tayo, pwede naman tayo mag-object ng nung nag-adjourn, nung final yan. So, as the minority leader said, nandyan na yan, wag na natin tignan yung nakalipas. Forward na tayo, no?
Meantime, Senator Rowan Padilla filed a resolution declaring the impeachment proceedings terminated. It therefore requests the Senate Secretary to transmit this information to the lower house and the Vice President.
Hindi naman kami nag-uusap-usap, may kanya-kanya kaming isip, may kanya-kanya kaming gawa, may kanya-kanya kaming staff.
So hindi yung Duterte move, sir, yung kasi...
Kami ang Duterte kami. Di ba malinaw naman siguro yun, kahit sunugin mo ako dito, mangangamoy Rodrigo Roa Duterte ako, di ba? Pero yung draft ko, walang kinalaman sa draft ni ganito o draft ni ganon. Akin yun sa sarili ko.
Okay,
So
Mary
far-
Mon, go ahead.
So far, yan pala yung latest mula dito sa Senado. Pero isang malinaw sa ngayon, hati pa rin at wala pa talagang konsensus ang ating mga senador pagdating dito sa pag-convene nila bilang impeachment court. Ladies.
Linawin natin, Mary Mon, ang pagbobotohan, hindi ba yung motion ni Senator Coco Pimentel para sila na ay maging isang impeachment court pero bukas pa sana nakapaloob doon ang pagdinig doon sa articles of impeachment bukas.
Yes. Bukas around 2 o'clock p.m. So, kung sakali man na pagbobotohan and the majority of the Senate will agree na gagawin na nga nila ito, na imbes on June 11, bukas na siya gagawin, bukas mangyayari yung convening ng Senado as impeachment court. Doon din gagawin yung oath-taking ng mga presiding officer, pati ang mga senator judges. Doon din mabubuo yung pinaka-trial calendar, yung pag-issuance, lalong-lalo na yung pag-issuance ng summons mula dito kay para kay VP Sara Duterte. Pero kasi ang catch din dito, 10 days pa ang hihintayin nga bago nga matapos talaga yung period of time para sa pagsagot ng Vice Presidente. Kaya yung pinaka nagiging conflict dito sa end ni Senate President Cheese Escudero, it will fall on the period or on the week na sarado na ang 19th Congress. Kaya ang malinaw pa rin dito kay SP, hanggang sa pag-issue lang ng summons ang magagawa ng 19th Congress. And then the 20th Congress, once it opens on July 28, araw din ng State of the Nation address ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, doon pa lang nila maaaring mapag-usapan at mapagdesisyonan kung iro-roll out na rin sa 20th Congress ang impeachment trial.
Mary Mon, marahil ang isang nakaka-delay nitong suspension, nakakatagal, yung resolution ni Senator Robin Padilla. Sariwain mo nga yung pag-uusap mo sa kanya kanina nung nakapanayam mo yung senador.
Actually, yun nga, nung mga lumipas na araw, bukod dito sa resolusyon mula kay Senator Padilla, may resolusyon na umiikot na nanggaling sa opisina ni Senator Bato de la Rosa. Pero kinonfirm kanina umaga ni SP Escudero, wala pa raw talagang naifa-file. Kaya ayaw niya rang pag-usapan itong sinasabing resolusyon. Pero dito kay Senator Robin Padilla, since ito ay nagmumula na raw sa kanya, maaaring mamaya ay mapag-uusapan ito. Kasi once na nag-file ng motion or ng resolution sa plenaryo, dapat daw nila ito agad mapag-usapan. At kung sakali, doon din maaring magkaroon ng paghudyat sa pagboto o kaya naman yung pagkuha ng consensus ng plenaryo kung paano nga ba nila tutugunan itong pinaka-motion. Ses.
Okay, Marymon, sa labas naman ng Senate, kamusta ang sitwasyon? Earlier, there were demonstrations held. Meron pa rin bang mga tao sa labas?
So far, mas tahimik na kumpara nung kanina umaga kasi yung Tindig Pilipinas, ito nga yung mga kilusin at coalition of coalitions siya. So mula ito sa mga civil groups, even mga senior citizens at mga kabataan, nagsama-sama sila at naglakad sila mula Manila Film Center papunta dito sa Senado para i-bombard na at i-echo out na yung kanilang pagkadismaya sa tuloy-tuloy raw na pagka-delay nitong pinaka-impeachment proceeding and impeachment trial. Tulad ng sinabi ni Kiko D. Aquino, ito raw ay nagiging labag sa konstitusyon at kung wala raw silang gagawin para raw ma-vocalize pa yung sentimiento ng mga taong naghihintay sa accountability sa vice-presidente, ito na pinakagagawin nila. And yung protesta nila, it will run for 3 days. So bukas, asahan natin na meron silang gagawing vigil in the evening. And on June 11, yung pinaka-araw na hinihintay ng lahat, maaaring magkilos protesta rin talaga sila na mas marami o mas malakas kumpara ngayong unang araw nila.
Okay, maraming salamat sa iyo, Marymon Reyes. Diyan ka lang sa Senado. Baka naman tumapat pa sa programa natin ang botohan na inaantabayan na natin. Maraming salamat sa iyo.
Right, well, Senate President Francis Escudero remains adamant the Senate will not be rushed to start the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. Escudero rejected calls by various groups for the Senate to fulfill its constitutional mandate of starting the trial against Duterte. Some are already holding rallies outside the Senate House and vowed to continue until the Senate acts. Escudero maintained the Senate would proceed with its schedule to convene as an impeachment court and to hear the presentation of charges against Duterte on June 11.
Hindi ko gusto si VP Sara, pero hindi rin ako galit sa kanya. I am performing and doing my role the best way I see fit without any fear or bias in favor or against anyone. Itong mga taong nagmamadali, klaro naman na ayaw sa kanya. Kilala nyo naman sila eh. Ito mga gigil na gigil, klaro naman na gusto siyang matanggal. Sino mang pabor o kontra kay VP Sara, sino mang pabor o kontra sa impeachment, may posisyon na sila. Hindi ako magpapadala sa kanila.
Francis Tolentino's proposal to shorten the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. Under Tolentino's proposal, the trial will only run from June 11 until the end of the 19th Congress on June 30. With this schedule, the prosecution and defense teams will only have 1 to 2 days each to present their evidence. And for this to be possible, Tolentino suggested that the House reduce the number of impeachment articles from 7 to 2.
Meanwhile, calls for the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte continue to get louder. The faculties of several universities have issued statements calling on the Senate to begin the trial. The Ateneo Law School deans cited the supremacy of the Constitution as the fundamental law of the land and that faithful obedience of the constitutional mandates is requisite and mandatory. The University of Santo Tomas echoed this call, saying the Constitution must be respected and the Senate should fulfill its duty and proceed forthwith. UP Law faculty members criticized moves to dismiss the impeachment complaint as this will undermine the core democratic principles of checks and balances. De La Salle University, for its part, reminded the senators of the 19th and 20th Congress of their constitutional duties to act as impartial stewards of justice. The Makati Business Club has also chimed in, becoming the first major business group to join the growing calls for the trial to begin. The MBC expressed concern that the current standoff may affect foreign and local investments. The Philippine Bar Association, for its part, said that no matter how people interpret the word forthwith, it sure does not mean several months of delay.
Well, In a statement, Vice President Sara Duterte's defense team says they are prepared to confront the charges against her. Her lawyer said, should the Senate choose to proceed, we stand ready to expose the baselessness of the accusations against the Vice President. However, they reiterated their position that the process to impeach the Vice President suffers from serious constitutional infirmities.
Tindig Pilipinas also wants the Senate to step up its impeachment proceedings. This morning, the coalition, composed of political parties, civil society organizations, and pro-democracy groups, marched towards the upper chamber from the Manila Film Center in Pasay. This is part of a series of rallies Tindig Pilipinas has planned to pressure the Senate to fulfill its constitutional mandate of making the impeachment happen. The group will be holding street actions beyond June 11 when the upper chamber hears in open session the articles of impeachment against Vice President Duterte. How far will Tindig Pilipinas see the impeachment trial through? Let's ask its co-convener, Kiko Aquino D, who joins us now via Zoom. Kiko, of course, is one of the grandsons of the late President Cory and the late Senator Ninoy Aquino. Good evening to you, Kiko, and welcome to The Big Story.
Hi, good evening po, Ma'am Ces. Good evening po sa lahat ng mga nakikinig po ngayon.
All right, I'm sure just like us, you're monitoring the events at the Senate. And after your protest action today, now comes a resolution from Senator Robin Padilla seeking to terminate the impeachment. What do you say to this?
So I think it's, I haven't had the chance to read the draft resolution yet po, no? But it sounds a lot like the move that was attempted by, I forget who's claiming it now, whether it's Senator Tolentino or Senator De La Rosa, but it seems like something that was similar to what was attempted last week, which was to dismiss the impeachment complaint without even having a trial. No? And I think the voices of all of our legal community is quite clear. I haven't, many statements have been made by different law schools, different law faculties, and not one of them said that dismissal of an impeachment complaint without it going to trial is in line with what is mandated by our Constitution. So I think this is another attempt to sort of railroad justice in favor of one particular party. And I think that's not something that will stand. No? I think a lot of people, maraming naganahan na lumabas this week because of that blatant move by that cabal of senators.
Mm-hmm. What are your plans for the coming days?
So I think we're very closely monitoring the situation po, no? It sounds like that there's potential for a vote on the resolution of Senators Pimentel and Hontiveros maybe as early as tonight, no? And so I think depending on the fallout of that vote, we will be discussing whether any of our next steps need to be adjusted. But currently, yung mangyayari po ay bukas magkakaroon po ng vigil outside the Senate gate, the same, more or less the same location where we had the rally from earlier today, from 5 to 9 p.m. tomorrow. And then the day after po, we're planning another large protest from, I believe, it's 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock po, 4 o'clock being the time that was originally announced that for the reading of the articles of impeachment. But again, we're still closely monitoring the situation.
It's very fluid. Yeah, the situation is very fluid.
We're continuing to figure out how to respond.
But would Tindig claim credit for at least, a vote happening today instead of, 2 days later?
I think, to be fair, a lot of the credit should go to Senator Hontiveros, who I think we've been working with a lot, just to get the ball rolling on impeachment. No? Because while a lot of us in Tindig, we've been quite transparent that we're part of a lot of us are part of the first group of complainants that filed against VP Sara Duterte. We'd really like to see this trial go forward towards impeachment. I think Senator Hontiveros, at that stage of our filing, she kept a respectful distance because she was supposed to be a senator judge. She is supposed to be a senator judge, and she is supposed to judge impartially. But in this particular situation, where the Senate is really looking like it's abandoning, or at the very least, binabalewala nila, ini-ignore nila yung mandato ng ating konstitusyon, that's where she had to step forward and say, whatever your position is, we need to hear the case. No? So I think a lot of credit if there is faster progress compared to what was announced last week. I think a lot of the credit should go to Senators Pimentel and Senator Risa and Senator Coco.
Kiko, let's dial it back. I know right now we're waiting and there could be a vote, but earlier today when you guys were outside the Senate, ano ba yung inaabangan ninyo exactly? And once magsimula nga, and honestly, Senator Cheese has been pretty clear na he wants it to cross over. Is that not enough for Tindig Pilipinas? Na para kung tatawid naman siya and i-handle na lang ng 20th Congress, would that not be amenable to the group, the coalition?
Well, I think the spirit of the Constitution says that, again, baka sawa na po tayo hearing it, no? But
Tama, mga argumento, no?
Some people just need to be repeated again and again, no? Or some people just need to hear it again and again, no? Pero forthwith yung nakasulat eh. So I think at this point, given the amount of evidence that's present against Vice President Duterte, it is, I think, unrealistic. It's insane to paraphrase Senator Hontiveros, to expect that the entirety of the trial can be conducted within the 19th Congress. And so we're looking at a crossover situation. If you were to ask me personally, I think that this was not necessary. No, if the House of Representatives had acted sooner and elevated the impeachment complaint, or at least began discussing it 10 session days after they received it in December, or if the Senate had acted more swiftly and began sort of reading the articles of impeachment when they received it in February, we wouldn't have to deal with this question of crossover. But now that we're here, it seems to me that crossing over will happen, but that doesn't excuse, I think, the 19th Congress from still reading the impeachment complaint. No? And I think the other point to emphasize is now that we are crossing over, I've just recently learned from the contribution of former Justice Ascuna that apparently we have pretty good jurisprudence on our side to say that crossing over is the more likely interpretation of our Constitution, given how we were patterned after the U.S. Constitution, the impeachment of President Clinton carried over between Congresses. It would be very strange because the idea of the Philippine Constitution was it was supposed to improve on the American Constitution. It would be very strange if it were more lax in terms of public accountability, and that seems to be what's underlying this crossing over question.
Well, Kiko, I mean, pressure is building from the public. Senators admitted that it's not just Vice President Sara Duterte who is on trial. Even the Senate now is on trial because they're now a court of public opinion. How do you plan to sustain this pressure from your groups? I mean, more and more people are starting to come forward, universities, lawyers, business groups.
The church.
The church, yes.
I think what we've been working with is just build it and they will come, diba? Parang when we met, I think last week, in response to the moving of the reading of articles of impeachment from June 2 to June 11, we all felt that, I mean, if they're pushing it this far, what's to stop them from pushing it further? And so we decided, okay, this is a very grave situation. We have to come out in full force. And we mobilized a lot of our organizations to come out, and we were happy to see that a lot of people just walked in, not really associated with any organization, but felt the same way that we do, na binabastos talaga yung konstitusyon natin, and they wanted to make a stand there. So we're grateful for that, and I think just the next step moving it forward, I think the idea is we will show up, people will know where we are, people who feel similarly as we do will know where we are June 10, June 11. Everyone is very welcome to join us during those times to make our voices heard. And hopefully, even if we get what we want, for instance, even if we get maybe an earlier reading of the articles of impeachment, it's still something that I think it's very important that all Filipinos interested in public accountability should continue to monitor the situation and make sure that the trial is conducted as cleanly as possible.
So safe to say, Kiko, whether or not magkabutuhan tonight, tuloy pa rin yung events ninyo tomorrow. Just to make sure, no, babantayan natin na matutuloy talaga yung proseso.
So to be very honest po, magkakamiting kami bukas na umaga just to assess what will happen tonight, no? So I currently the status quo is still in effect, no? So we're still having a mobilization tomorrow. I guess medyo a little serendipitously we planned a smaller mobilization for tomorrow night, no? So this will be a vigil led by our I think it's Akbayan Youth taking the lead for this one, although a lot of different Tindig members will be present. But it's going to be a vigil, so prayer, also some jamming, because it's a more useful sort of set of organizers. But I think I guess we're a little lucky that we have a bit of time to regroup and figure out. I really don't think that a Senate should be this chaotic, no? But given that that's what's going on, we will discuss, and we will definitely make our announcements as soon as we have quickly assessed the situation.
Well, Kiko, in order to fast-track this impeachment trial, Senator Francis Tolentino suggested that the prosecution narrow down the articles of impeachment from 7 to 2. What do you make of that?
So I don't like the idea of fast tracking it, right? So I think if you'll recall, Paul, the first impeachment group, we had of the 3 citizen-filed impeachment complaints, we had the longest set. No, we had, I think, 24 different articles, if I remember correctly. So, so many things have happened. It was half a year ago. But we had 24 articles of impeachment, and we felt that a lot of the actions of the Vice President should be included in the conversation that will take place around this in the halls of the Senate during the impeachment trial, and in the public that will be looking at the impeachment. So for us, I think at least for us in the first impeachment group, and Tindig is that's largely associated with Tindig, I think 2 articles is not enough, no? Is definitely not enough. And even if it were to be limited to 2 articles, there seems to be evidence upon evidence that was unearthed by the different committees of the lower house that sort of speak to the anomalous spending of the Vice President of her confidential and intelligence funds under the OVP and under DepEd. No? So I think even if you were to limit it to 2 articles, I don't think 3 days is necessarily enough to cover all of the evidence that is held. So I'm not very enthusiastic with that reduced timeline. But again, I think what's important is I think we're in good standing to cross over to the 20th, although again, it's unfortunate that we're in this situation, but we're in good standing to do it. And I think what's important for the Senate to do now is to do its duty. Its duty is to receive the articles of impeachment, commence the trial forthwith, and then if it crosses over, it crosses over.
I guess go ahead, Seth. I was just going to ask about the truncated schedule.
Okay.
Yung 19
because
days.
my question is more personal.
Okay, sige.
Go ahead.
We'll save that one for last. The truncated schedule that was floated,
Ma'am
I
Seth,
think.
sorry, I think
Can you hear us?
coming a little choppy po. Sorry, you're coming a little choppy po.
Okay, what about now, Kiko? Can you hear us okay?
Yes, better.
Okay.
Better. Thank you.
There was also a proposed schedule that was being floated para matapos by June 30. I'm guessing just like your answer to Pauline's question, ganun din yung thoughts ninyo. Would you be satisfied with that kind of a 19-day schedule?
No, definitely not. No? So I think there's a preponderance of evidence that needs to be presented by the prosecution, and I think rushing something like that, it's strange, no? So parang the Senate President, or sabagay, it's Senator Tolentino, so I guess they're different entities. But on the one hand, the Senate seems to be very defensive when it's perceived that that people are rushing them. When in fact, if just to briefly respond to like the quote of Senate President Escudero, I don't think it's the people rushing him. It's the Constitution rushing him. We're just saying what's written there. No? So they seem to be very defensive when they feel like they're being rushed, but they're very happy to rush this process that is mandated by the Constitution. So that it really doesn't seem consistent. No. Again, I think we're on very good grounds to cross over into the 20th Congress. We've seen it done in the US. Justice Ascuna has mentioned that we've seen this done in the UK, which is what the US Constitution sort of was inspired by. It would be very strange if the Philippines is suddenly going to relax on accountability when the promise of the 1987 Constitution was to improve on the US Constitution, on other countries' constitutions. So I think we should really use this opportunity to show the world that we can hold our public officials accountable. Not just our fellow Filipinos, but show the world that this is something that the Philippines can actually plant a flag on.
Okay, finally, Kiko, I wanted to ask you, we were talking over each other kanina, maybe that's why you couldn't hear, but what your reading is of the sentiment of youth like you, and do you get to converse with those who have a contrary opinion? Do you get to, talk to people who think differently?
Right. I think so. I'd be very careful, about claiming to speak for the youth. No, so I'm 33, so I'm at the tail end of being able to claim that I'm youth.
Millennial pa rin yata yung 33.
Millennial.
Depende sa definition. Parang bawal na ako tumakbong party list representative, not for the youth. Not that I want to, but so yun po. I'd be very careful about claiming to speak for the youth po. That being said, I think I'm actually more of a survey nerd, to be honest. And I think what we saw in particular in the last election is that while it doesn't explain the whole thing, we've seen that the voting behavior of our Gen Z seems to be a bit different from the voting behavior of the rest of the population. I'm not Gen Z, no, so I'm a little older than that. And my generation kind of votes more like the rest of the population. But Gen Z seems to be a lot more interested in politicians that really hold their ground, people who are principled. A lot of them, I think, supported candidates that are aligned with the principles that I have, that Tindig Pilipinas has. A lot of them voted for other politicians who are maybe not aligned, but have clear principles. I think what Gen Z or what the youth seems to punish is politicians who waver, who are unclear about their principles, who don't have anything to offer but kaway-kaway, magandang yung guwapo. Kumbaga yung mga politiko na guwapo lang yung ambag nila. I think Gen Z has a lot less patience for that. No? And siguro po in terms of conversing with people on the other side of the issue. To be transparent naman po, I think a lot of us are guilty of sort of sticking within our echo chambers. I'm not gonna pretend that I don't do that myself, but I do still have some Facebook friends from Davao. I see them post once in a while. I don't see any of them claiming that VP Sara should not face the impeachment. I think a lot of them are confident that VP Sara can respond to the allegations placed in front of her. And so I think it's very strange that a lot of people on supporters of VP Sara like to claim they have the numbers, like to claim that the impeachment case is baseless, like to make all of these claims. And yet, how the Senate chooses to respond to this is to delay the impeachment. No? So if it's correct that she has so many advantages, what's the point of the delay? No? Why not just let the impeachment go and let senators acquit her? No? So again, I think while I think there is some reasonable division over whether people support or oppose the vice president, no? I think there is a significant majority of people like on our camp that want to see the trial proceed and see her sort of convicted, and there's a bunch of people in the Duterte camp who want to see the trial proceed and see Sara Duterte defend herself. No? So I think there is a strange sort of confluence
A meeting of the minds in that sense. All right.
Yeah. Completely different places. There's a meeting of the minds. At saka yung Senado lang talaga yung nagsasabi na hindi na lang natin itutuloy. So I really don't know who they're pleasing with this. And again, I think the lesson of the last election was our new crop of voters are a lot less enthusiastic about politicians who aren't willing to take a stand.
All right. We thank you so much for your time.
Thank
That
you very
was Tindig Pilipinas co-convener Kiko Aquino D.
Right, we're just going to take a quick break, but coming up on the big story, the House of Representatives is waiting with bated breath too as Duterte's impeachment trial slowly moves along at the Senate. The details of that when we return. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the big story. House prosecutors expressed opposition to the proposed plan to finish the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte in just 19 days. According to Congressman Gutierrez, it's not possible to present all pieces of evidence within 2 days or compress 7 articles of impeachment into just 2. Senate Majority Leader Francis Tolentino made the recommendation to start the proceedings on June 11 and come up with a judgment or decision on June 30, which also marks the last day of the 19th Congress.
Personally, I don't think it would be possible on our part to just consolidate it into 2 articles. That would be a betrayal of the full articles of impeachment that we have filed. We're not ready yet to say how much time we need, but definitely 2 days will not be enough.
Gutierrez's fellow lawmakers in the lower chamber echoed his sentiment. They insist the impeachment trial isn't part of the legislative functions of the Senate, so it can definitely cross into the 20th Congress. Recall that those who recommended the dismissal of the trial cited the constitutional prohibition of carrying over legislative agenda from one Congress to the next.
Hindi siya bound by the legislative calendar. We are still standing on that, na hindi siya dapat magpa-tali doon sa usapin na hanggang June 30 lang.
Alam natin pag minadali, kulang yung oras sa dami ng mga ebidensya na ipipresenta. So again, sana ma-realize nila na it's always the Constitution over personal ambition.
And helping us make sense of what transpired today and what is still transpiring at the Senate, all those back and forth about the legalities of an impeachment trial, we have Paulo Tamase, Assistant Professor at the University of the Philippines College of Law. Good evening to you, Prof, and welcome to the big story.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening to your viewers.
Well, first of all, the resolution filed by Senator Robin Padilla while the debate was ongoing on whether the Senate should vote on what Senator Coco Pimentel and Senator Ontiveros presented to the floor, on the floor.
Yeah, I think it's similar to the resolution that went around last Wednesday or Tuesday last week, which really triggered this wave of responses from law schools and law faculty about these supposed dangers with continuing the trial. They're not credible threats to constitutional order that the trial can proceed despite the crossing over from the 19th to the 20th Congress. And so I think we can refer to those statements that the law faculties have made in relation to that new resolution.
So it kind of justifies the call because ngayon hindi na scrap of paper, hindi na pwedeng sabihin ni Senate President Cheese Escudero na scrap of paper lang yan. It's a resolution filed before the Senate.
Yes, and I think it's why the law schools and academic institutions really put their foot down when it came to that proposed dismissal de facto or functional dismissal. They couldn't see any basis for it in the Constitution. And I think if you prioritize accountability, it made a lot more sense to interpret these provisions in favor of continuing to the next Congress.
But Senate President Cheese Escudero in a press conference and on the Senate floor explained why they're being attacked when similar incidents happened in previous impeachment trials. The Senate was also on recess. They went on recess and just resumed after, and yet hindi naman daw sila tinuligsa ng ganito. They're really taking it hard.
Yeah, I did notice that. I think you tie that with the comment of Senator Alan Cayetano, who seems to have really bristled at the academic criticism of this. But on the part of the law schools and the law faculty who write those statements and really write it from a very deep study of the Constitution, it's fealty to the truth. It's just how we really understand the Constitution as neutrally read. Without, our jobs don't depend on us reading it one way or the other. So we just have to read it as it says. Now,
Walang
has to be-
personalan, in other words.
Yeah,
But they did
right.
take it personally, right? They were bristling at the criticism.
It seems, yeah, it seems, but it's a good reminder also for the Senate that it's not only just the vice president who is accountable in these proceedings. Sila mismo, right? May pananagutan sila sa mamamayan at sa constituents nila. We are voters like the rest of our fellow citizens. But on the particular points that they raised, I think the reason why there was no complaints, or there were no complaints about the past impeachment processes, was because this one is different. I think we're making false equivalencies between
Okay.
the Corona and the Estrada impeachments in this one. Those did not start after a 4-month delay. And a delay that really, there is a delay that was not only 4 months, but a delay that was further delayed because it was supposed to start on June 2. It did not face the same objections from senators about the trial crossing over to the next Congress. The circumstances of this one are different.
Also, if I may add, why didn't you criticize the House as well? They dragged their feet as well because other impeachment complaints were not referred to the Justice Committee. Bakit hindi kayo galit sa kanila? It seems a bit petty, but it's an oft-repeated observation by the Senate President.
I get that. But I think you need to compare the role of the Senate and the role of the House. The role of the House when it comes to impeachments is more discretionary than the Senate's role. So, the House gets to say whether an impeachment complaint is sufficient in form, whether it's sufficient in substance, whether they believe that these offenses really did happen. The Senate's duty is to try and decide. It's a much narrower duty that's easier to enforce.
But it could be tactical too, perhaps they are not ready to, they're still shoring up political support, but there's discretion there. It's looser.
Yeah, definitely a lot more discretion than what's given to the Senate. Now, whether the vice president is guilty or not guilty is absolutely up to the Senate to decide. But whether they should proceed to trial and get to that point of decision-making is not discretionary upon them based on a fair reading of the Constitution.
Prof, I have to cut you there because the Senate is now resuming its session, and I'm sure you'll be watching just like us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on the law.
Thank you as well.
At this point, we take you to the Senate plenary where the motion to kickstart the Duterte impeachment trial will be put to a vote. Finally, let's listen in.
Officer of the impeachment court. Sige. And then, with the convening, Mr. President, I think tomorrow when we take our oath, we are convened as the impeachment court. So I don't know. That's my technical understanding, Mr. President, because the presiding officer will now call the impeachment court to session, and then the members will now take their oath as senator judges. So that is already convening the court as far as this representation is concerned.
What does
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. President,
Senator Villanueva is recognized.
As the movement of the motion, Mr. President, I stand firm with the motion that I am proposing right now, as this came through out of the consultations made by this representation to a lot of members of the Senate, Mr. President. Just to put that on record.
But just to clarify, this is akin or similar, Honorable Villanueva, to, for example, those who are newly elected to serve a term beginning January 30, 2025, who won in the last elections, where they can take their oath today,
Yes.
next week, or even for the past several days. But still, the term of their office will commence or begin on June 30. Would that be a good analogy?
Yes, Mr. President, you are correct, Mr. President.
What is the pleasure of the Honorable Marcos? Or nakatayo? What is the pleasure of the Honorable Revilla, Padilla, and then De La Rosa?
Ginoong Pangulo, gusto ko lamang pong malinawan sa salitang Tagalog na ang hudyat po ng ating mahal na kapatid na Senator Joel Villanueva na kayo po ay mag-oath. Hindi po ibig sabihin na tayo po ay naguhubad na ngayon ng sombrero ng pagiging legislative body kung di tayo po ay hindi pa rin korte. Gusto ko lamang pong linawin.
Tama po, Ginoong Pangulo, ang binigkas ng ating kapatid, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, na hindi po natin hinuhubad ang ating sombrero bilang legislative body ng Senado at hindi po tayo nagko-convene as an impeachment court.
Maraming salamat po. Yun lamang po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Honorable De La Rosa and then the Honorable Tolentino.
Yeah, I just would like to be clarified, Mr. President. If it follows that after all the members of this body have taken their oath, it would automatically trigger the convening of the impeachment court. Therefore, I move that we make our oath on the 11th, Mr. President, as originally scheduled.
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. President.
Senator Villanueva.
To just clarify, Mr. President, the motion is for the Senate President. At this time, the motion at hand is that the Senate President would take his oath as the presiding officer of the impeachment court. The next motion that we agreed upon a while ago is for the members of the Senate, the senator judges, to take their oaths, Mr. President. But just the same, Mr. President, let me emphasize again, whether today or tomorrow's oath-taking, this representation was made to believe that we are not yet convening as a court.
I agree, Mr. President.
And we are to convene the impeachment court on Wednesday, June 11.
I agree, Mr. President.
That is the...
Senator Tolentino.
President, just to further clarify, Mr. President, the impending oath of the Senate President is, if I'm not mistaken, and the movant can clarify this, pursuant to Resolution 39, Section 3 of our rules, which states, and I quote the pertinent provision, the President of the Senate shall preside in all other cases of impeachment, and for that purpose be placed under the prescribed oath or affirmation by any person authorized by law to administer an oath. The same, Mr. President, is pursuant to the constitutional command under Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 6, that when sitting for that purpose, referring to the impeachment, the senators shall be on oath or affirmation. Is that the correct clarification, interpretation, if I may ask the movant, Mr. President?
What does the movant say?
Yung po bang panunumpa ngayon ng ating Senate President ay sang-ayon sa Resolution number 39 patungkol sa impeachment proceedings at sang-ayon din sa Article 11, Section 3 patungkol po sa panunumpa ng Senate President at lahat ng senador kung magbubukas ang isang impeachment trial court. Yun lamang po.
Yes, Mr. President, the answer is in the affirmative, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We can
Senator Pimentel is recognized.
Since we are debating on the nature of the third motion, actually, we're still on the second motion. Kaya nga. So, maybe if we can wait for the third motion and then revive this topic, Mr. President.
I have no problem with that, Mr. President. And so I moved for the previous motion, Mr. President. The previous motion to the Senate President
And
to take his
Senator
oath.
Coco, you have no objection as to the clarification made by Senator De La Rosa earlier with respect to the second motion. Is that correct?
Because it is more appropriate for the third motion which has not
Yes.
been made, Mr. President. So, mas nalilito tayo when we we anticipate
So
the
there
third
is
motion.
no reservation as to the second motion of the gentleman from Bulacan for the chair to take his oath as presiding officer. Is
of
that
the
the understanding of the
presiding
chair?
officer of the impeachment court. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Senator De La Rosa.
My clarification, Mr. President, was not yet forthrightly answered, Mr. President. Can this can the presiding officer give us a clear explanation as to whether or not we are convened right after all the members of this chamber have taken their oath? Because according to what we have discussed a while ago, that the convening of the court, of the impeachment court, shall proceed only on 11 or Wednesday.
That's no. We are still on the second motion, Honorable De La Rosa.
That is why, Mr. President, that's a precondition. Because otherwise, that's my question is a precondition to your taking of oath. Because if you say that it will trigger, then I will object to your to that motion.
Understood. Senator Cayetano, what
Sir
is your
President,
pleasure?
If it will help,
You may proceed, sir, if it will help.
in the same manner, Mr. President, that you said that parang po yung mga nanalo nung May election, June 30 pa naman sila mag-hold office pero pwede na sila mag-oath. If the Supreme Court was in recess now, but the President appointed 3, 4, 5, 6 justices, they can take their oath. At kahit 15 yan na sabay-sabay ng oath, it will not mean that they are convening the Supreme Court for another session. They will still be in recess. It will be either the law, which sets a date, or in our case, here in plenary, we will set the date kung kailan i-convene. So if it will help, so what will happen is you will take your oath tonight, then because we referred it to the Committee on Rules, then following precedents, which is part of our rules, then tomorrow, we will take our oath as a group, but yung pagko-convene, in accordance then with our agreement and your notice, will be on Wednesday. If we all accept that, our taking of our oath tomorrow will not trigger the convention of the of convening of the trial court. Of course, if we all agree today that after we take our oath, it will convene, then it will convene. But if we all agree we will just be taking our oath today, it's no different than new appointees of the Supreme Court or the CA or the RTC taking their oath, then waiting till the recess is over before they convene. No, if we all accept that, Mr. President.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Mr. President, mga kasama, ang ginawa natin, tinilad-tilad natin yung original motion ng minority leader. Dahil sa primary issue na ni-raise ng gentleman from Camarines Norte and BARM na dapat tulad ng naging practice nung nakaraang mga impeachment processes, bagamat wala sa rules, i-refer muna sa Committee on Rules. Mapagbigay po ang minority. Nakipag-usap po kami sa inyong lahat sa pamamagitan ng ating pamunuan. At pumayag po kami, pumasok po kami dun sa kasunduan na sige, i-refer na muna sa Committee on Rules. Ipasa ibang araw yung panunumpa nating lahat before the presiding officer, pero siya ay manunumpa bilang presiding officer ngayong gabi. Natural na epekto na kapag ngayong araw manumpa ang presiding officer, bukas ay tayong lahat naman manunumpa bilang senator judges, natural na epekto yun na we have constituted an impeachment court. Hindi yun po ang unang issue na ni-raise na prejudicial issue. Yun lamang na bakit hindi idadaan din sa Committee on Rules. Nagbigay na po ang minority dyan. Tinilad-tilad na po natin yung original motion na hindi muna magko-constitute as impeachment court ngayong araw, ire-refer nga sa Committee on Rules gaya ng hiniling ng good gentleman from Camarines Norte and BARM. At ngayong gabi, yung presiding officer lamang manunumpa. Bukas, tayong lahat ng iba ay manunumpa. At yung unang aktual na araw ng trabaho ng trial court ay sa Miyerkules pa. So please, maging resonable naman po tayo at tumupad naman po sa mga kasunduan nung tayo ay ilang oras na nagbubuo ng kompromiso na handa na nating tanggapin dito. Tumupad na kami dun sa prejudicial concern na idaan muna sa Committee on Rules at iisa lang ang manunumpa ngayong gabi. Bukas, tayong lahat ng iba. There is no harm na nag-convene na tayo bilang korte bukas dahil wala pang gagawin ang korte bilang korte sa Miyerkules pa po. So I am appealing to the plenary, i-uphold naman natin yung pinaghirapan nating compromise nitong nakaraang 2 araw na tumupad dun sa unang issue na ni-raise ng good gentleman from Camarines Norte at BARM. Please lamang po mga kasama, palihog mga kauban. Salamat, Mr.
Thank
President.
you, Senator Ontiveros. Senator De La Rosa is recognized.
Actually, Mr. President, the majority is kind enough para pagbigyan yung pakiusap ng minority. Na originally naka-schedule na tayo on May 11, yung ating lahat-lahat na gagawin. June 11, lahat natin gagawin. So, what's the difference kung yung aming pakiusap ay pagbigyan rin naman?
Mr. President, just a clarification.
With the permission of Senator De La Rosa, Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Just to clarify, and I beg the indulgence of the minority, everyone's in good faith kasi ang napag-usapan natin off the record, refer na natin tonight, mag-oath na si SP as presiding officer of the impeachment court. Tomorrow tayong mag-oath and then ituloy yung Wednesday. Yun yung agreement natin. We were silent on convening. So, good faith everyone because ang pagkaintindi naming marami na convening is a formal act. Hindi lang yung pag-oath na triggers that, di ba? Ang pagkaintindi pala ng minority is that, so I'm just saying, if we cannot agree, we cannot agree. But there's no bad faith in both sides. So, please accept
Or where they are, apparently, they had a caucus and there was some agreement. They're just clarifying what it is that will happen. And please continue to watch if you're interested on our social media platforms. We now give way to regular programming.
That's right. So again, that's on One News on YouTube. You can watch that. But that's the show, I guess, for this Monday evening.
Thank you so much for watching The Big Story.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We'll be back tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We'll see you. Have a good night, everyone.
Coming up next on One News is Play-by-Play with Andre Felix and Denise Tan. Guys, medyo mahirap tapatan, no? ang action in the Senate.
But we're all glued. I think most of the country is really glued to what's going on right now. And as you said, as Cez mentioned, it will be aired on our social media platforms, the feed. Akala ko nga hindi na kami air pero may commercial break. Kung gusto ng commercial break from
mga nagpapababa ng blood pressure.
Kasi may mga balita naman kami about the NBA Finals, about the PVL draft, and a lot more. But thank you once again to the ladies of The Big Story.
Let me just mention there were 2 athletes actually in the Senate, right behind Senator Peter Cayetano. They were waiting.
The poor guys. Sino young?
Yes, I believe
look like athletes.
Gilas under 16, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
but it looks anyway like the Senate has come to agreement.
And they're
it's
just laying
a matter
out.
of voting.
Yeah. And then laying out yung siguro informal terms what they've talked about off cam.
No, but going back to what Pawi said, I think yung Gilas under 16, because they'll be recognized because they won.
Yes, may
Kaya
courtesy
pinatawag
calls.
sa
It's
inyo
way
eh.
past their bedtime.
Kailangan nila mag-antay eh.
But front row seats to
Kawawa
history.
naman tapat sa
Oo,
debate.
Yung mga bata, siguro iniisip, ba't pa tayo nandito, ganito.
Hindi, it's an education for them.
Yes, front row seats. To a
But thank
good
you once again to Ses, to Sean, and to Pawi. Of course, as we mentioned, One News will keep tabs on the Senate plenary while play-by-play is ongoing. But, okay, a little bit of commercial, Denise. In sports, as we said, a lot of news going on. Let's start with the NBA. The Oklahoma City Thunder pulling even now with the Indiana Pacers with a game to win in the NBA Finals. Plus, how about this kid right here? Gymnastics golden boy, Carlos Yulo, picking up where he left off, getting several medals in his first competition since the Olympic Games in Paris.
And we've got a recap of last night's PVL draft as Capital One selects Bella Belen first overall. Surprise!